Hey, what's up, guys? John here. I'm sitting here with Meat Mafia. They focus primarily on clean eating, health, and in a world in which has essentially been taken over by, what did you say? I saw a reel. It was like 47,000 products are owned by 10 companies.
About 10 publicly traded companies. Yeah. Crazy centralization.
That's absolutely nuts. So every time you go to a store, whether it be Whole Foods, you're looking at down the aisle, you see all these different brands. It's really one and the same.
100%. Yeah, there's really a war going on for the soul of our country and our health right now. So we just feel really passionate about putting out the right information that people really need to hear so they know what the hell is going on. So you arm yourself with the right information, and then you can actually make steps to do something about it and get yourself into the best health that you can possibly be in.
Yeah. I mean, because right now it's, even when you go to Whole Foods, like you buy chicken, you buy steak, and you cook it up, it doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't look or taste the same as it did just a couple of years ago.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people don't really understand. We've grown so distant from how our food is produced that most people don't really understand the different processes that go into high quality food. Like you're talking about chicken. Most people don't realize that grocery store chicken is sprayed with chlorine after it's processed just to disinfect it. And that chlorine obviously isn't all that great for you. That's the same thing that we put in pools to clean pools. So it's not supposed to go in your body in that way. So we just have all these things going on in the food system that people really aren't all that aware of.
Yeah, I was in Peru 2 weeks ago, and I went to a restaurant and I ordered some chicken dish and ate it. And halfway through, I brought the server up. I'm like, when was this chicken, distributed to you? And he's like, oh, it was taken by the farmer, butchered this morning. We prepared it in probably 3 hours. It tasted unlike any chicken that I've had here, and like the way in which it broke down in your mouth, it just felt really good.
Yeah,
it just felt like great food. So much so that we've even thought of like, oh, we need to spend more time there, just to be able to eat clean and yeah, I mean the chicken here, the food here is heading, I think, in one direction. And it's just going to get worse.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a crazy thought to think that you're literally willing to potentially go to another country more just because you want access to that fresh food. And the fact that we don't have that in the US it's pretty insane to think about from a human perspective, because we like to think that we're progressing in every single aspect, technology, economics, et cetera. But food is one of those weird things that's regressed significantly over the last 100 years. And I think Whole Foods is an amazing example. Obviously they got acquired by Amazon, but early on in our podcast, we talked to a lot of these local Texas ranchers that were like the early ranchers that got into Whole Foods in the 90s. And when John Mackey was running the company, they had a really strong emphasis on grass finish, like regenerative practices, ranchers that were really doing things the right way. Where since that acquisition, they're just opting for the largest farm that can give them the best possible deal on meat. And there's all this weird greenwashing and labeling behind the scenes in our meat industry that a lot of people don't know about. So legally in the US, you can raise and slaughter an animal in Brazil, but as long as you're packaging it in the US, you can actually label that as a product of the USA. So a lot of people are going to Whole Foods and they see local Texas beef, for example, but it's probably a product of Brazil that's just been greenwashed as a product of the USA. And no one really knows that this is going on.
Today's video is sponsored by GreatCreditFast. Do you want to invest in real estate or possibly Airbnb? Maybe you want to start and grow a company or a business or possibly get debt free. With great credit, you're able to achieve all of this and much, much more. The last thing that you want to do is borrow money from a credit card company paying 25 or 27% interest, because when you look at the real numbers and you look at what's actually happening in the economy, that's the worst strategy and it's almost a guaranteed failure. Take a look at this. So if you're borrowing $10,000 at a 27% interest rate, paying $250 a month, it's going to take about 9 years to pay this off and about $16,000 in wasted resources paid to one of these credit card companies. However, with great credit, you're able to do a balance transfer in most cases and get debt free for 0% interest and pay this off in a fraction of the time. In 2008, banks started tightening up lending restrictions, and that's exactly what they are doing now. They're getting ready to tighten up lending restrictions, meaning that if you have that low credit score, 400, 500, 600 credit score, if you're in that even low 700s, it becomes much more challenging to get access to money. But if you look at Blackstone, for example, Blackstone, they are using their credit and their relationships to raise money. They've just raised $30 billion to invest in single family rentals. If you want to invest in real estate, you want to really grow and scale during the greatest wealth transfer of all time, you're going to need great credit to do it. We would love to give you a free consultation to see how we can help you at GreatCreditFast.com. That's GreatCreditFast.com, or give us a call at 561-430-5900. Now back to the show.
What other examples are there that people don't realize about the food or about the meat in which we consume?
A second one would just be the concept of a grass-fed label for beef in general. For a cow, right, they have this incredible ability to digest grass and metabolize it in a way that humans obviously aren't able to. So we think that, if it's labeled grass-fed, that must mean that the cow is fed grass the entirety of their lives, not corn, wheat, soy, some of these other subsidies that they're hopped up on to get them as fat as possible. But legally, you can label something grass-fed if the cow was fed grass at any point in its entire life. So a lot of people are paying more money for this like green labeled grass-fed beef when it probably wasn't actually finished on grass. So that's a big reason why you should have a relationship with your local rancher, is you can actually ask them the right questions of, hey, was this grain finished? Was this grass finished? And really in a grocery store, it's very tough to find beef that's labeled as grass finished. There are a few brands that are out there, like Force of Nature is a great brand that's all grass finished regenerative meat. So if you see that at a Whole Foods or a grocery store, that's typically a really good product. But outside of that, if the butcher doesn't know, there's really no way for you to verify, which is why going to your local farmer and rancher and connecting with them and asking those questions, that's how you can buy the best product for yourself.
So what if you live in New York City or LA or San Francisco or Miami where you don't have a local farmer? How do you go about finding one to where you can actually get that delivered to your house? Yeah,
the cool thing is that as this movement is progressing, there are a lot of great companies that are kind of acting like the middleman to make it as easy as possible to connect with a local rancher. What Good Ranchers, right? That's
Good
the
Ranchers.
brand. So we had the founder, Ben Spell, who's the founder of Good Ranchers, and they're a meat delivery company. So what they do is they work with grass-finished regenerative ranchers. They order product in bulk, and then they have a website. So then you can order directly from their website, and they'll just ship it right to your front door.
Oh, cool.
Which is great. And there's more companies like that are popping up. And there's some ranches that as they scale, they're able to just directly ship to your front door too. So White Oak Pastures in Bluffton, Georgia, they're probably the most well-known regenerative ranch. You can order right off the website. There's also a great ranch in San Diego called Perennial Pastures. But if I was in New York, there's actually amazing farmers markets. There's amazing Amish farmers in Pennsylvania that do drop-offs into New York City and like the New York metropolitan region. And I think they do that in South Florida too. Oh, wow. So you can you can go on the website and you pay like $100 to become a member, and then you can just schedule your meat shipments and then just meet them at a pickup point, and you can get raw milk, eggs, meat, all the good stuff, which is really cool.
Pick up like a drug deal kind of.
Exactly. Yeah.
Pick up steaks. Yeah.
So it's a little bit more work, but you can definitely do it too. And I think there's like one farmer's market in Miami that's supposed to be really good, but I'm blanking on the name of what it is.
Interesting. How much more do you think it costs to eat really, really clean like that compared to if you were to go to Whole Foods?
Oh, it's such a good question. I mean, the thing that I always go back to is Harry and I have had such dramatic impacts in our own health from eating the right way over the course of like 6 to 7 years. Like I had an autoimmune disease where it was called ulcerative colitis. So I was literally shitting blood like 20 to 30 times a day. My medication for that cost $400,000 a year covered by the healthcare system. So I think the time I was on that medication, I think I cost the healthcare system $2.4 million to deal with this disease. So for me, it's like, I don't really view these things as a cost, even if they're a little bit more expensive up front. I kind of view it as a holistic asset because it's completely transformed my health and my life. You're probably paying a few dollars more on average for some of these products, but it's like you have to pay for quality, right? It's so interesting because we're conditioned to compare a regenerative piece of meat versus like a bag of Lay's potato chips that's $1.50 that probably costs Frito-Lay 10 cents to make all in. That product is made for hyperpalatability, it's meant for convenience, it's meant for taste, versus something like a piece of meat. There's like energy, there's nutrients, there's vitality. So like you should be paying a little bit more. So if you can buy from the rancher, great. But also if your budget only allows for you to go to the grocery store, if you're just shopping in the outer aisle and you're still doing like budget ground beef and vegetables and stuff like that, you're still going to be better off than 90% of people that are out there too. So there's levels to it, and the regenerative stuff is a little bit more expensive, but you get what you pay for.
Yeah, I always look at everything nowadays as like the spread of. So
yes.
It's like if you go to a nice restaurant and it's I have 2 kids and a wife, it's a family of 4. You go to a nice restaurant, maybe it costs you $100, $150, something like that. You eat crap and it's probably going to cost you even more, obviously, medically over the course of a couple of years, but it might be $60, $70.
Yes.
So the spread's $50, and you actually eat something better for you. You think better, you feel better,
yes.
Sleep better. But I think we live in a world where I think things are actually going to get more expensive, and prioritizing your health in advance of that, I think, is just going to pay dividends over the long term.
Yeah,
particularly healthcare costs.
Yeah,
I mean, it's going to get more and more expensive to get quality care. I think care is probably going to get really commoditized, but if you want like really specific care for conditions that you're dealing with, like it's going to be more and more expensive.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are trying to lean as far away from traditional healthcare as possible.
Yeah.
Like I think over the last couple of years, a lot of people that were kind of on the fence are now more like, let's try to find another way.
Totally.
Yeah. And speaking of that, have you heard of this company in town called Crowd Health before?
Never.
Their founder, Andy Schoonover, would be a great guest for the podcast. He had a couple healthcare startups that he sold. And when he was uninsured, his daughter had some type of like an ear infection and they had to get surgery. He thought he was covered by Cobra or something like that. And he ended up getting foot with a $8,000 bill for that procedure. So he was like, the system is so broken. There has to be a better way. So he started this company called Crowd Health, which is basically a crowd-funded alternative to healthcare insurance. So there's like 7,000 members that are part of the Crowd Health community. And so you pay like $100 a month. So if John breaks his arm, Harry and I will get hit with like a small contribution request to actually cover the cost of your medical bills, your doctor's visits, et cetera. So I think the deductible is like $500 and then the community covers everything beyond that.
That's the coolest idea.
And it actually works too. Like there have been some serious medical issues that have happened in the community and they just are able to come in, foot the bill. And a lot of the people that are in the community are Bitcoiners, they're carnivore, they're libertarian, they're really conscious about how they treat their bodies. So you feel this obligation to protect the other people in the community. You actually have a connection with the other members because a lot of us are friends. So it's just a really cool example of like we can actually write the course of the ship. And it's cool to just see new startups that are doing things the right way that are actually having an impact.
That's really cool. When did he start the company?
I think it was about 2 years ago.
That's pretty cool. He mainly grew like what, social media?
I think mostly social media. He does a ton of podcasts too. And like people in this like carnivore regenerative movement are just gravitating towards it because they're like, I don't really have that many medical bills, but I do want to make sure I have some protection as well. So this is like the perfect solution for them too.
What do you think is a really good, I guess, carnivore diet? Like what would you suggest for someone that wants to go on some type of like maybe a 30-day, experiment where they really start to try to consume better food and kind of go down that road?
Yeah. You want to kick it off?
Yeah. I think if you're looking to start a carnivore diet, I would start simple. One of the things that worked well for me is just making sure I was getting enough sleep beforehand, really not focusing too much on the workout component, because one of the things a lot of people deal with when they get on a carnivore diet is a little bit of a drop in energy. So just prioritizing the food component, really making sure that you're leaning into cooking a lot of your meals, taking control of all the ingredients that you're putting in your body. So what I like to do is start by learning 2 or 3 meals that you really like to eat and make those kind of like the bedrock of what you're going to be consuming for that 30-day period. So I love like ground beef and just like a little bit of siete taco seasoning is kind of like a simple one to start with. Like it's not perfect for everyone, but I think it does a great job of just like setting the foundation of like a basic meal that you can cook up in 5 to 10 minutes for relatively cheap. And then, on top of that, some other meals, like I think just like leaning into like eggs, like scrambled eggs, relatively cheap, something that you can make easily, throw some cheese on there, throw a little bit of hot sauce if you need that. And boom, you have like 2 meals that you can kind of like go back and forth with. I think the carnivore diet for a lot of people can be really powerful in a really short period of time. Like within a week, a lot of people realize that a lot of the foods that they had been consuming just through the elimination process, the elimination diet, a lot of these foods were causing inflammation, causing brain fog, causing fatigue. And so they realize within 7 days, oh, wow, this is something I really want to invest into and continue to invest into. So during that first 7-day period, I would just say like trust the process and like have some faith. Like you might have some gut irritation to begin with. And I think a lot of that's just part of the process of your gut turning over, your gut microbiome is changing to actually not have to process these processed foods and really focus on processing real food. So there's a little bit of a turnover period. But by that 7th day, I would bet that you're feeling incredible and you're feeling more ready to invest in this diet more and more. So yeah, that's where I would start.
Yeah, it's a great blueprint. And for anyone that doesn't know, a carnivore diet is really it's a removal diet where you're just eating all animal products. So like a great grocery list would be like as much red meat as you want, chicken if you like chicken, fish if you like fish, eggs, some cheese, water. Coffee is technically not carnivore, but a lot of people do it. When I went carnivore in 2019, I was still drinking black coffee. So like a template of eating that worked really well for me was I would try and get a gram of protein per pound of body weight that I actually had. So I was around 190 pounds at the time. So I was shooting for like 190 grams of animal protein. So I would start in the morning. I would make a black coffee. I would throw a little butter in there. There's a lot of fat. There's a lot of vitamins in there. It kind of, the fat really helps with the satiety. So that would be my breakfast. And then for lunch, I would do like chicken thighs, steak, some ground beef, about a pound of that. And then I would probably be full for like 5 to 6 hours. And then dinner around like 6 or 7 o'clock would be like a ribeye or something really fatty as well. Cook it in butter, beef tallow. You can use salt, you can use spices. And the beautiful thing about this diet is you're really just flooding your body with nutrients, like Harry said. So you're getting a ton of protein, you're getting a lot of saturated fat, you're getting a lot of vitamins in there too. And you're cutting out all the crap that's probably causing gut distress, GI issues, inflammation, etc. So it's a great way to take inventory over, okay, what are the foods that actually make me feel really good versus the foods that make me feel really bad? But I just think like a 30-day carnivore diet for everyone is just an amazing tool. And like Harry said, you really can't out-exercise a bad diet. So if you're just eating these foods for 30 days and you're shooting to walk 10 to 15,000 steps a day, which is really easy to do. Like a great way to get your steps in is just every time you have a meal, just take a 10 to 15 minute walk. It's great for digestion. It's an easy way to get like an additional 2,000 steps in at a pop, and just keep iterating, keep a food journal so you have an understanding of what foods you're eating, what makes you feel good, what makes your energy levels feel good. And, I think we're pretty confident that it could change your life because it's changed our lives and a lot of the listeners of the show too.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
What do you think about what's happening right now with meat? They're trying to push plant-based everything.
Yeah.
And do you think they're going to make meat a little bit more challenging to get? Do you think they're going to start to kind of? It seems like a lot is happening with farmers globally.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, it's really interesting just to see a lot of this like dogmatic propaganda. It seems like on Netflix, there's like a new plant-based documentary that pops up every 2 to 3 years that just causes this explosion of people that are trying to go plant-based. And I think the unfortunate thing is that a lot of people that are falling for the allure of these documentaries is that their heart is actually in the right place and they're trying to do the thing that they think is healthy, but they're actually just not being taught or informed about the right information that's out there, right? I think what it comes back to for us, when you look at meat, the human species has thrived and evolved off of meat. Like there are a lot of studies that point to the fact that our brains are the specific size that they are because of the saturated fat consumption that we had back in that hunter-gatherer stage. So for us, it just comes down to the fact that how is a food that we've eaten for 2.5 million years that we've effectively thrived on all of a sudden is leading to chronic disease, inflammation, all this other stuff. So for us, it comes down to the fact that meat is super healthy. It can actually be good for the environment. And if you continue to lean into the right information and actually eat these foods, you'll feel so good that you're like, I don't need a peer-reviewed study to tell me whether meat is good for me or bad for me. I just know that it's actually good for me too. So that's just something that we come back to a lot.
Yeah, and anyone who's listening who might think like this is a conspiratorial take, just Google C40 cities. So Austin is a C40 city, and there's an agenda in place essentially to cut back on red meat consumption across these major cities across the world. So
I'm very familiar with the website.
Yeah.
Los Angeles, LA. They have some really big goals about emissions, vehicles, building standards, food waste, everything. It's really shocking, and I think a lot of people,
I think it's like somewhat of a form of suppression. Like they're setting all these like arbitrary boundaries around like what you can and can't do. And I think if you're looking a step further, there's probably another step here where like if a central bank digital currency gets put into place, there's going to be certain parameters around what you can and can't spend on to help these cities meet these goals. And I think that these CBDCs will probably be most popular in big cities. So I think if you're, sitting here today loving eating red meat, and I wouldn't take that for granted. There is definitely an agenda in place that these cities are taking a part of to cut back red meat consumption.
Yeah, Mayor Adams in New York City came out publicly and said that New York City will be cutting down dramatically on red meat consumption.
Yeah.
And it's like it's pretty shocking. Like you read the headline, you're like, some people are like, whatever, maybe. It's like it's law. Like this is actually a commitment. They made this commitment. This is happening. When they say that we're going to get rid of gas stoves for pizza in New York City, you heard about that?
No.
Yeah, they want all the stoves to be electric. And so like if you ever had a pizza made of it's like Elio's.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like garbage pizza. You have
Yeah.
a nice like wood burning stove cooking you a nice slice of pepperoni pizza. It's a different experience.
Yeah, a lot of these the best pizza places in the city have these incredible ovens that have been there since like the 20s and 30s. So you're just going to rip those things out and put it in an electric stove?
Yeah, they're going to cap it and put electric in.
It's so ridiculous. But Adams is the ultimate hypocrite too, because he's essentially pushing his nutritional narrative on our children as well, which is super concerning to me. So New York City public schools have something called Meatless Mondays and Plant-Based Fridays. So kids that are a product of the public school system in New York are getting pushed to meat-free options for lunch every single day. And you think about how many children in New York City rely on these free lunches to be provided for them, and now they don't even have the option to have anything good. And if you look up pictures, if you just type in like NYC meatless Monday lunch, it's appalling. It's like tortilla chips and these shitty vegetables, and it's like I would never think about feeding that to a kid, and it's so crazy. And he's interesting too because he's technically plant-based, but if you look into some articles about his nutritional philosophy, they say that he eats fish every once in a while. And that's the interesting thing about a lot of these big people that are in the plant-based space, is that even if you have a serving of fish or a serving of animal protein once every couple weeks, that can still be enough to affect your blood work levels, where certain vitamins and nutrients are able to kind of offset some of the deficiencies. So he's like sneaking some of these things in, and he's saying he's plant-based and then pulling meat options for children.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if every night he's eating fish and steak.
100%.
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
and you have no way to verify too.
Yeah.
You just have to trust that he's allegedly plant-based.
Yeah, I had some friends that they did really, really well years ago, and they sold their company and moved to New York City and put their kids in a private school. And one kid maybe 3 years old and learning Mandarin. And I was like, wow, that was before I had kids. I was like, wow, they've given that kid a great opportunity to be able to really excel. And now looking at it, like as the last couple of years have kind of unwound it, I'm like, maybe it's not the opportunity that I initially assumed it was.
Yes.
Because like the New York City, what's happening in New York City schools, the education, food, everything, it's like, it actually might be a wheelchair they're putting on the kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like some serious social conditioning going on there. Like if your kid is in the wrong environment early on, like just the idea of meatless Mondays, it's like it sets this precedent that like meat is bad, and you know the kid learns that at an early age. They're never even gonna like cross the bridge to explore whether or not meat is good for them or not. So I think like the conditioning aspect is the thing that concerns me the most.
Well, they have this new thing, Jordan. What was it? It was like ecology or.
What was it called? Where fishing was bad for the environment.
Fishing was bad for the environment. Hunting was bad for the. They basically considered it. They compared meat consumption and the death of animals similar to the death of humans, and they're basically comparing one or the other, or they're comparing them both as the same, and moving in a direction in which to prevent any type of basically harm to animals.
Yeah.
And it came out World Economic Forum Davos, that meeting that just happened like a week ago, and they came out publicly talking about it and like listening to it, and it's just like it is so crazy how fast this train is moving towards everything. Like even the vertically integrated farms, and you hear about some of these farmers, what they're going through here in America. It's just like it's really shocking.
Yeah.
Like, a couple of years ago it was moving kind of slow, and I feel like lately it's just been ramping up. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it feels like there's a massive schism. Like, there's people who are isolated, living like potentially in a city, not really having these types of conversations, listening to podcasts, getting access to this contrarian information. And they are just like hook, line, and sinker buying like everything that's being put in front of them. And then it does seem like there's this contrarian movement that's sitting here being like, whoa, hold up. Like we need to like slow down with some of this stuff that's getting pushed. But the speed at which things are changing, I couldn't agree more. It's like COVID did this like weird time warp where I feel like it made us more focused on our phones.
Yeah.
And so this virtual vortex has our attention more and more, and people are getting a lot of their information just through scrolling their social media feeds. And I think that there's something to that. Like we're getting so much stuff on a highly reoccurring basis just put in front of us, and it's fear mongering. It's tapping into these like very, very high like things that like really capture your attention. And I think there's a really big negative to the amount of information that's getting plugged in front of us on a daily basis.
I couldn't agree more.
It makes it seem like stuff's happening way faster because it is.
Yeah, like literally every single day a breaking story is coming out.
Yeah.
And so like you could have some major event that happened in some random country, where a couple years ago people would talk about it for months and months and months, and now a major event happens, people forgot about it by lunch.
Definitely.
And it's just like, holy crap, like, and because of this, people just accept everything so quickly, and there's no pushback on like any type of any of like what's happening in New York City schools or any of that stuff. People are like, okay, that happened, and then it's like, oh, protests, or oh, this happened, and it's just yeah, I think the last couple of years with your phones, it's just allowed this train to just not stop moving. It's moving like a like a speeding train.
Yeah, our attention spans are so short right now. It's crazy.
Yeah, I wonder what it will look like in the next couple of years, because it seems like we're just going to continue moving in this direction. I don't think we're going back anytime soon.
Yeah, I was watching a YouTube video the other day, and it was just talking about how technology, particularly cell phones, is changing our reward system, our reward mechanism in our biology, like through dopamine. So, the fact that we open up our phone and get a dopamine hit basically every single time when there's a message or a notification saying, someone liked a post or someone DM'd you, like all of these things are affecting our dopamine system, which is our reward system. And so there's definitely some biological change happening like with us as a species right now, where we are getting more and more glued to these phones without really even taking the time to consider what that actually implies.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes I'll find myself on a pattern. Like I'll be like on one app, then I check my email, go back to a different app, and check the one, like, and then I tell myself like, you just checked your email 3 times in the last minute.
100%.
Like I'm putting this phone down.
Yes.
Like, I'm done.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's interesting. What do you think is going to be this, because of what's happening right now with everyone, consuming all this information and kind of forgetting about it? What do you think is going to be this movement with farmers? Because it seems like there's like this carbon pipeline that's happening. I'm sure you probably heard about this in America. It's like 2,400 miles. It's going to be going across some of the most fertile land, and they're basically forcing the farmers to sell the land to it's like John Deere, and it's a really big. There's a lot of really big money behind it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's 2,400 miles across like Nebraska and North Dakota and South Dakota and all throughout. Have you guys heard about that?
I haven't heard about it.
No.
Yeah, so they're moving to buy out all these farmers.
Wow.
And I heard about some farmer in, I think it's North Carolina, where he refused to meet these new standards for his animals, because he basically sells a subscription where people, I don't know how much they pay monthly, but they're able to go out there and they're able to get their food delivered, just like what you were saying.
Yeah.
But he didn't want to, like, I guess, inject the animals with the new standard.
Yes.
And they took his animals and like shut down his whole operation.
Yeah, you might be talking about Amos Miller, who's up in Amish County, Pennsylvania, too. This has gained a ton of steam the last couple of weeks. So Amos Miller, he's one of the most well-known Amish farmers. So he has one of those private membership associations that we were talking about, where like you can pay $100 a month, you join the membership, and then you can order, meat, milk, eggs, chicken. They have all these incredible products. And because they're Amish, they don't believe in treating the animals with anything. So they don't vaccinate the cattle. They practice regenerative practices, and they go a step beyond, where I think if something is USDA level for it to be sold in a grocery store, I think there's certain chemicals and things that you have to spray on the meat. And he refuses to do that. And his members don't want that either. That's why they're joining this private membership association. It's like this sacred transaction between rancher and customer. Obviously, the USDA, the FDA, they don't like that. They're saying that he's breaking the law. He's breaking their provisions. So they have effectively raided his entire ranch. They shut down the farm store. So there's like a huge GoFundMe going on for people to send him money so they can fight these insane legal charges that he's currently facing right now too. So we've effectively restricted our ability for like a rancher and a customer to engage in like a willful transaction together.
So the one I'm thinking about happened about 2.5-3 months ago.
Oh, okay.
So it's like,
wow. So it's another one.
It's a different one. Yeah. So it's like, to that point, it's like it's moving pretty quickly. It'll be interesting to kind of see what this move is going to be, because what I'm betting on, if I were a betting man, I would bet that the cost of energy is going to continue to go up, taxes and insurance are going to go up. It's going to get harder for some of these farmers to, the farmers that have their farms paid off, that have that flexibility, they're going to be able to kind of weather a storm. But a lot of the farmers don't. A lot of the farmers like have debt, and when you start to see a lot of this plant-based product that can be, produced at a very, very, very low price point, I would imagine, coming in, and people are in an affordability crisis, people that have money are going to be able to eat really, really clean. Yeah, and they're going to be able to like really take care of their bodies. They're going to be able to spend the money. And then people that don't might be living in cities that are using some CBDC that is going to have some type of plant-based, mass-produced food. What do you think about that? Do you think that's right or wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much completely agree with what you're saying, and you made me think of something too with the farmers. So I think there's basically two cohorts of farmers. There's one that is doing things conventionally, which is I think these farmers are debt burdened. They have most of their crops are covered by crop insurance. They're selling mostly these standard commoditized crops, soy, corn, etc. And those farmers, I think, are going to do really poorly going forward. They really don't have any flexibility, and quite frankly, like they are farmers, but they're just kind of contributing to this big, highly processed food system. These regenerative farmers that we're talking about, they really have done something unique where they're not really reliant on chemicals to support their farming practices. They're not reliant on heavy machinery to support their farming practices. So their profit per acre is much higher, and they have way fewer assets that they need to put debt on. So those guys actually, I think, stand a chance because they're also thinking about things differently, where they're like, I need to know my end customer. I need to know who I'm selling directly to so that when things do get weird, I still have a customer base to sell to. These other guys, they're selling to a multinational corporation that is going to negotiate prices with them until they're completely out of business, or the government has to step in so that the food system doesn't get put in a precarious situation. But like, I think these guys who are really like taking things to an extreme right now are going to be totally fine, and these farmers who are stuck in the conventional system are really going to struggle over the next few decades.
Yeah, like if I had a like I would bet that the top 10% of earners will be able to go out. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to, do exactly what you're saying. Like eating really, really clean, eating that top quality meat, I think is going to grow. It's going to be like Bitcoin over the next like decade, where everyone's like, okay, I need to eat healthier. I need to take care of my body more. And they're going to start, supporting a lot of these farms, and a lot of these farms that don't have debt are going to be able to like weather that storm. But a lot of the people that don't are going to have like a kind of a harder time.
Yes.
What do you think about the meat industry over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think that, to Harry's point and to what you're saying, John, I think that the average size of a farm is going to continue to increase as it has the last 50 plus years. The average size of a farm has gotten so much bigger than what it was 50 years ago. But I think there's going to continue to be these pockets of really smart first generation regenerative ranchers that maybe actually came from a different industry and got really passionate about food and want to actually fix the food system, that are going to get into ranching, and we're going to develop more hyper localized sources of food that are going to pop up. Something that we draw inspiration from is a farm that we're really close with, Perennial Pastures. It's actually a first generation ranch out of San Diego. So the founder, Kevin Muno, he suffered from autoimmune disease. He played Division I baseball in college, and he was an early employee at ServiceNow when they IPO'd. So when he started developing this affinity towards ranching, he took his ServiceNow money, which allowed him to actually start the ranch and establish like a D2C shipping operation, doing things regeneratively all the right way. And then he realized, okay, well, if I really want to scale this thing, I need more land. Land in Southern California is super expensive. So we actually pooled together a group of really wealthy investors, and he was able to raise an additional $2 million, which is now going to allow him to buy thousands of more acres to really scale his operation. So I think that we're going to see this pocket of very savvy young ranchers whose hearts are in the right place that are going to pool together capital, and that's how they're going to be able to kind of right the direction of the ship.
Yep, I fully agree with you. Like Michael Burry was saying the same thing. Is like there's no better investment than land with a natural water source.
Yes,
and I think you see a lot of people right now that have a lot of money that are like, okay, where am I going to put it? I want to put it in land. Like, what do I care about? I care about my health.
Yes,
like you're just going to start seeing a lot of people. I think pulling money together, just like that investor in San Diego.
Definitely, and from a customer side too, I think that. Like when you're talking about 88% of Americans being metabolically unhealthy and 7 out of every 10 Americans being overweight or obese, I think the average person is now just starting to wake up to realize, oh, wow, so what the U.S. dietary guidelines have been pushing for the last 30, 40 plus years, that information probably isn't correct, because if we're listening to the guidelines and we're this sick and unhealthy, those must not be the right food groups that we're eating. So I think even we see it observationally with our friends from New York and Boston. When I went carnivore in 2019, people thought I was nuts. Now I have a ton of friends that are outside of the health space that are asking me, hey, where can I find a local rancher? Hey, can you write me a guide on how to go carnivore? I want to start doing this thing. I think the average customer is starting to wake up and is going to really start to demand these good quality products like you're talking about. So I think that gives us hope too.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at all the mania that's happened the last 4 years, never once did you hear anything on television about getting sunlight, eating healthy, eating, properly, getting exercise.
Yeah.
Like, you never ever heard of any of that.
Yes.
It was always like, oh, here, take this. This will solve all your problems.
100%.
And it's just like the more you start seeing that, the more people I think are, people aren't dumb.
Yeah.
Like they see the writing on the wall.
Yes.
And the data was very supportive of, the correlation between high vitamin D levels and immunity and not having negative side effects with was really high. Like people who were getting outside, getting exercise, they weren't running into the same health issues that people were running into 3 years ago because they had high vitamin D levels. They were able to fight off the virus by themselves, by their own immunity. So it's interesting, that there's a lot of information that got pushed out there, and I think it just grew. It made like truth seekers look to alternative places to go find solutions for themselves. And there's a lot of people now who are podcasting, writing newsletters, putting information out there, just trying to share knowledge so people are equipped, like understanding, hey, you don't have to go down this conventional route in order to be healthy.
Yeah. Do the same entities that were providing that solution that they were offering, they also have a pretty large stake in the 47,000 offers?
Yeah,
those
I would say
10
so.
companies, right?
Yeah. A thing that I always go back to, because I lived in New York for
Like the perfect up and down sell, right?
Yeah.
The perfect funnel.
Oh, it's the perfect funnel. I remember seeing this ad when I lived in New York where it was Krispy Kreme advertising 2 free donuts if you get and I'm like, that's the exact funnel that we're talking about here too. Yeah.
I've seen those too. It's like, they were offering. You seen the one with Como? He's like, or no, it was
De Blasio.
French fries and cheeseburgers.
Yeah, just munching down seed oil laced potatoes for in exchange for a
Yeah.
If you go back and look at some of the stuff that was happening during that time period, it's like, was that real? Like, I'm blown away by some of the stuff that was getting pushed to get people to do that. So
my wife was a nurse in like 2019 and she stopped like around 2020. And then her friend's like, oh, I'm not going to get it. And then they did like this lottery where it's like, oh, you could win something. And her friend's like, all right. Like, and then she ended up getting it over this lottery ticket. But the lottery ticket was like $200. And it was like the entire floor of the hospital. I'm like, it's so interesting how people, can be swayed over something. Like they have no real backbone in their beliefs.
Yeah.
They can just quickly be like, okay, I'm going to change my perspective on this for that little upside.
Yeah. If there's one thing that taught me, taught me is that point exactly, which is like people are very susceptible to not, I don't want to say brainwashing, but just kind of like falling in line, whether it's, you see like your information gets spread to like your close family members and your friends, and then you start to just kind of like fall in line and believe what they're believing, or coworkers are saying certain things. Like social pressure can really change how you perceive what you're doing. And for people who actually like stood their ground and were in those situations isolated, I would say like it's probably such a small percentage of people, but yeah, it really taught me this idea of like, having firm beliefs. And I think there is a growing crop of people that grew more empowered through that. Like I look at like Dana White, Joe Rogan, even Elon Musk, like all these guys who had power beforehand. I think they're so much more empowered to stand their ground right now because there was this push to just kind of just like dilute down and water down the truth, or, what was perceived as the truth. And, I just think that there's now people out there who are willing to speak up, which before I think there were very few leaders who were actually putting their neck out there saying, hey, this isn't right.
Yeah, I would say like one of the coolest people out there that are like running a big company would be probably Dana. Like the way in which he runs a company, the way in which he communicates, the way in which he handles reporters, the way in which he just like runs his life and his business. The aura about him is just like pure.
Yes.
Like, he's just like authentic. And I think it's just everyone out there is trying to be somebody else to try to get, support and acceptance from the mainstream. I just think he just doesn't give a shit. I think that's why he's probably going to become way bigger over the next couple of years as more and more people just adapt and gravitate towards that.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, if you look at the Instagram numbers, I think the UFC has like 4 or 5 times a larger following than the NFL too, which speaks to the fact that customers want exactly what you're saying. They want that authenticity. They want that transparency. They want the no bullshit. They don't want their sport to be overly politicized or propagated with all this dogma or whatever you want to call it. They just want to enjoy a great product and have it be entertaining and just have a great guy that kind of heads it up.
Yeah. I mean, look at like Sean Strickland, like what he's done with his career just being like rough and raw, everybody like, you know, loves Sean Strickland basically. Like,
Yeah.
everyone's backing him because he just like, you saw that one interview where they're like, oh yeah, what do you think about I think it was like gay and lesbian people or something.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, you're the part of like, he was talking to that reporter,
That
was trying to,
Canadian
like,
reporter.
force him,
Yeah.
Yeah.
into like submitting.
Yeah, I think it just shows that I think a lot of us consumers, customers, whatever, we're craving the people that actually just say what we're all thinking too.
Yeah.
So that's why your voice has so much power, even if it's a podcast like this or a conversation with your friend or family member. Like, you don't understand who you could impact just by actually speaking your truth too. Don't just be complicit and go along with the narrative. Like, if you feel differently, I think you have an obligation to share a lot of that stuff. Otherwise, where are we going to be in a decade from now?
Yeah. Do you think we're going to see a situation in America where a lot of people are going to leave the country over what's happening to America?
It's such a good question.
I've been thinking about this a lot more recently. I could see it. I mean, there's definitely a case for, you know, if these big cities continue to be able to influence people in a way where, like, you know, there really isn't anywhere to go, and you know, certain parts of the country are restricting free speech. Like, migration is definitely the number one way to get out of bad situations. And there are countries out there who would gladly take people from the U.S. who are skilled and want to work, but just don't want to be a part of this massive political machine that the U.S. has kind of become over the past like 20 years, 30 years. So yeah, I could definitely see it. And it's become easier to work remotely. And
Yeah.
if there are some cities that are just super protective of free speech and people's rights and are just going to make a stance like that, I think that people would, and we're kind of seeing it. Like, Latin America is there's like reverse migration happening. Like, a lot of people are going to Latin America right now. Not saying they're going to stay there long term necessarily, but that to me is like an indicator that over the next several decades, that could become a trend where people are just fleeing these cities for better quality of life, not having to feel like they're just wrapped up in this big American political machine. I could see it.
Yeah, I met with a guy yesterday. He's like, oh yeah, I just bought a place in Argentina with a couple friends, and if it were in America, it would be like, you know, a $2.5–3 million property. Yeah. We bought it for, I think he said like $400,000. And he said we all went out to eat, and it was 5 of us. We had 5 bottles of wine. Everybody had steaks. It was $115. And I was like, yeah. He was basically saying it was
Sounds good.
Yeah, yeah. He was basically saying that $1 equates to $15 in purchasing power.
Wow.
So it's just like, it's interesting. I think we're going to see a lot of people doing that. A lot of people just having a new way of looking at the world the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think we are, and I think we're going to continue to see the trends that you're talking about. And I also just hope that enough people that have this similar mindset can like develop a backbone to actually fight for like the freedom and the soul of this country too, right? Not just like let us lose the war to these like globalists or these indoctrinationalists. And I feel like if we're in a battle, like we should actually just choose to fight. I mean, it's the greatest country ever. It's the greatest experiment ever, right? Why not try and fight for what we have too?
Yeah. And yeah, I couldn't agree with you anymore. Like, I love America.
Yeah.
But like, I think they've done such an incredible job at dividing people through left, right, black, white, like basically every single divisive way. They've done it to where people can't even communicate clearly, to where they can't, like, a lot of families are kind of like, not what they once were. They weren't, you know, because of what's happened the last couple of years. Relationships with brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, uncles, aunts are kind of slightly severed because a lot of people took a strong stance in 2020, and now they're like, oh, there's kind of some battle wounds there on that relationship.
Yeah.
The family unit, the degradation of the family unit was a problem before the pandemic, and I think it's only gotten worse. And it's really sad. I mean, that's like what America, I think, was founded on, and what made it so great during certain time periods is just, you know, these values that we all share and the opportunity to actually create a life for yourself that a lot of other countries really don't have. And so I just think it's, to echo Brett's point, like, this is a spiritual, I believe it's like a spiritual battle going on right now. There's definitely evil in the world. There's definitely good in the world. And I believe that our voices are really the only things that can create change. And so podcasts like this are amazing, where you can go out and speak to a new audience and tell people, you know, hey, like, you using your voice, you acting in a certain way is actually going to make an effect. Like, you are impressing people, you are leading people in a certain direction, and all of these small moments are adding up. And I think we're seeing that now, like going back to the point about like Dana White and some of these other people, like, they're pushing back on advertisers. Like, I've never seen a CEO openly push back on advertisers, because he would rather his business fail than someone come in and tell him what he can and can't do.
Yeah, didn't he like throw out all of his Peloton equipment or what was that? Like
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
He's
He
like,
threw it all out.
I think it was like at a meeting or like they were having some type of press conference. He's like, yeah, throw it all away or something. Like,
Yeah. He's like, you're not going to tell me what I can and can't say.
Yeah.
We're just done. We're not working together anymore.
That's like, yeah. I mean, if I was an advertiser, I'd be like, whatever his price is, I want to advertise with this guy. Because people will actually buy what you're selling if this guy's promoting it.
Yeah,
because everyone knows like, okay, this guy's actually going to vet the product. He's authentic. He's not going to get behind something that is just trash.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. So yeah, I fully agree with you.
Yeah.
What do you think what's the ultimate goal with Meat Mafia over the next couple of years?
I think the ultimate goal is to really carve our den in the food system and be able to actually fix the food system too. I think what we feel through conversations like this is I think we have the correct and just very simplified view of nutrition and health, and how health and fitness is one of the fairest pursuits ever, where it's not like football where you can put in all the work and then someone's just more talented than you. Fitness and health is one of those things where if you put in the work, even if you have some type of a chronic disease, if you have the right dietary inputs and lifestyle inputs, you can literally change, and everyone's entitled to amazing health. So we just wish that so many more people had access to the type of information that we're talking about. So we just want to grow it as much as possible. We want to grow our podcast as much as possible. We want to grow our newsletter as much as possible. We want to write books. We want to do documentaries. We want to give people insight into what's happened to the American rancher and the food system that's kind of led us to be into the situation that we're currently in, but also give people hope that like there are things that you do have control over, one of them being the foods that you choose to put into your body. And you have this very small but incredible sphere of influence, and that can spiderweb to so many other people that are out there. So I think just pushing this medium through all the other forms of media that actually exist is huge. And then also with our supplement company, Noble Origins, we wanted to create a product and a supplement that really embodied the dietary beliefs that we have and just offer it in a very affordable, delicious way that everyone can have it and get access to some of these incredible products that exist.
So what is this supplement? Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so it's actually an all-in-one protein powder. So most protein powders are either plant-based or they're whey, which comes from the milk of the cow. And the issue with whey protein is that it's very heavily processed, and they're taking the milk from these like industrialized cows that are fed on grain, which again, even a dairy cow is supposed to be eating grass for the entirety of its life. So what we did with Noble is we threw in a bunch of great ingredients into our protein powder to give you as many nutrients as possible. So one scoop of Noble is going to give you 25 grams of protein from beef protein isolate. So our protein is not from the milk, it's actually from the muscle tissue of the cow. And then we have a full spectrum of organs in there too, which is like heart, liver, spleen, pancreas, bone, blood. There's also colostrum in there, which is like the first milk of the mother cow, which is the most nutrient-dense part of the milk, but there's no lactose in it, so it sits really nicely in the gut and has really good digestive enzymes. And then there's also collagen in there too from like the actual connective tissue of the animal, so it's really good for hair, skin, and nails. It's good for gut health. And with all those ingredients that we're putting in there, the product actually tastes really good too because we sweeten it with stevia. So for anyone out there that's interested in these foods, or they've heard about organ meats, but they're worried about the taste of it, we have a chocolate and vanilla protein, and the chocolate literally tastes like chocolate milk, and the vanilla tastes like a, creamy vanilla milkshake. So that's what we're trying to do at Noble.
That's really, really cool. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I was just going to add to what Brett said. I think Athletic Greens did an amazing job kind of popularizing this idea of like one scoop, all in one, your daily source of everything that you need greens wise. And we've gotten to this point with nutrition where people just look through the lens of like greens versus like meat. And if you look at studies, the studies show that the bioavailability of nutrients in meat is much higher, much more highly uptaken in the body. And so our idea is take something that Athletic Greens did really well, which is this all-in-one concept. They have 72 vitamins in their product. It has all kind of these like sticker shock things, but really make it like this true supplement where one scoop, you have organs, you have colostrum, you have collagen, you have the protein in there, and it'll just support your journey and having a really healthy, badass life. Let you go pursue all the things that you want to do. That's a core mission of our show is, get healthy, but don't just like get in the health vortex and kind of like let that be this never-ending loop that you just are stuck in. Like I see that a lot. Like people and it's just a lot of people in the health industry. They're trying to put good information out there, but get healthy and then go do something with that. Go pursue your mission. Go start the next app. Go start the next website or the next big business. Those are the reasons why we get excited about getting people healthy. Is there's so much human potential in just this disease versus health, like that gap, there's so much human potential that's being lost. And I think we can just capitalize on getting people healthier and having people start to feel more empowered and do all the cool things that they want to do with their life.
Have you guys built some pretty cool relationships since you guys founded Meat Mafia?
Totally.
Yeah, it's been amazing. We're about 267 episodes into the podcast. We started it about 2 years ago, and I think anyone that's interested in starting a podcast should do it, because at a minimum, you're talking about something that you're passionate about. You're going to work on your public speaking ability, and you're going to connect with the coolest people ever, right? It's like, and I'm sure you saw this when you started the show, someone that you would reach out to grab coffee, they're probably not going to give you the time of day. You ask them to come on your podcast, it's a totally different conversation, because you're actually able to provide value to the guests that you're having on the show too. So like, you know, we had Will Harris on the podcast, who's the founder of White Oak Pastures that we were talking about. He's been on Joe Rogan's podcast twice. We had on Michael Chandler, the UFC fighter, Adrian Grenier from Entourage, Mark Sisson that founded Primal Kitchen. We actually just released our podcast with Mike Posner today. So he went from Grammy nominated artist to, he literally did a 3,000 mile walk across the entire country in 6 months. Wow. And then summited Mount Everest. But I think like our biggest takeaway is that we just have a lot of hope for humanity, and there's just a lot of really cool, special people that are doing awesome stuff.
That's all. You guys doing like basically 2 pods a week? Or
2 a week, yeah. We used to do more. We used to do like 3 to 4 a week. We
virtually or in person?
Virtual to start.
Yeah.
Because Harry was in Austin, I was living in San Diego, and our thesis was like, we're going from off the couch to trying to build a media company in the health space. So we just need to get as many reps in as possible. And people would be surprised, man. Like cold DMs work, and we were just shooting a ton of cold messages to people, and we were getting some really big name guests like Sean Baker and Ken Berry and a lot of people that were big in the carnivore space. And we're like, we got to just like jump at every single opportunity, and that's kind of snowballed into what we're doing now.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about it all the time. It's like how podcasts I feel like they're so undervalued, like compared to what they're actually worth. When you sit down with somebody face to face and you have a conversation with them for an hour, and then you talk to them a month later, 2 months later, and you're like, oh yeah, here, you should connect with this guy. And then, you know, a few months later, that person's like, oh wait, you should connect with this guy.
Yeah.
And before you know, you're this massive web of friendships, relationships, connections, business relationships. Like it just snowballs.
Yeah, the network effect through podcasting is insane, you know, because like if you have like someone who's done a couple hundred episodes and you have a really good conversation with them, you go deep, like in a way that you wouldn't really go deep if you had a coffee, or just like the nature of the conversation is just very different, and it's documented. So I think that there's some value exchange there where it's like, hey, you know, we're going to have this conversation. We're going to promote it to our audience. You know, we really appreciate you coming on our show. And then you just have this network of people that you can then tap into through this connection that you just made. It's incredible. Like, it really is this unbelievable resource that I feel like a lot of people like mock, like it's like, oh, another person with a podcast. But if you're committed to actually, I think the future of any sort of business, having a podcast is, if you believe that people are the backbone of any business, the growth of any business, podcasting is the place to start.
Yeah,
like
we talk about it all the time. It's like if you look at like an oil funnel, like you're going to put oil in a vehicle, the top of the funnel would be reels, short form, like TikTok, stuff like that. Then it gets down to the narrow base of the funnel that actually flows into the engine, which would be podcasts, long form content. People that are watching that long form content, watching it for an hour about something that you are passionate about, which is, you know, healthy living. You have 10,000 people watch you. That's more valuable than getting in front of 1 million, 2 million, 3 million paid Facebook ads. Like if you were to, 3 million impressions or whatever.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, it always comes back to Peter Drucker with the 1,000 true fans. Like if you have 1,000 people that are going to consistently tune in for every episode that you do, those are the people that are going to go crazy, and anything you promote or sell or come out with, like they're going to be lining up to buy your product too. Yeah.
Have you seen a difference between the relationships you built when you went from virtual to in person?
Oh, massive. Yeah. Massive. Yeah. And people don't realize that 86% of podcasts are still spread through word of mouth. So a lot of people that would come to some of the in-person health events that we would do, they listen to every episode of the show. They buy everything that they tune in for every episode. They send us DMs. It's like you've created super fans just by them getting to meet us in person and spend a day with them too. So like we want to ultimately do more in-person events as well. And I think that's a great lesson for any virtual creator, is like try to bridge that gap between doing something virtual with creating these in-person experiences where you can actually meet and connect with your audience too. And it's the serendipity that will come from that. You can't even quantify it.
Yeah. Like, so every single person I've ever done an in-person pod with, I've talked to a lot more than a lot of them that I've done virtual. Like I've done like several virtual, and we do the virtual, but it's so convenient for everybody that there's no real commitment.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, I'll tune in. You do like a little hour pod, and then you tune out. It's like, okay, on with the day, and then you kind of forget about it. But yeah, in person, it's like, oh, you both made this big commitment. You both traveled. You both, sound engineer. You brought everything together. Yeah, it's been really cool. I think we're trying to hit 100 pods this year.
Nice.
So like every month we're gonna try to. So we have the studio in South Florida, but every month we're gonna try to travel and like hit a big city and try to like get a lot of people together. And yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see kind of what comes of it.
I can't wait to see in a year what opportunities come from you guys doing that, because I think it's going to be bigger than you. I think it's going to be massive, but I think it could be even bigger than that too.
Yeah, I mean, they say 90% of people don't make it past 20 episodes. So the fact that you guys did 200 in 2 years is like absolutely kind of just shows the belief that you guys have in what you guys are representing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we go back to, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger talked about this a lot. He really believed in, especially with his bodybuilding career, like just picking that one thing and being willing to burn the ships and go all in on it. And as soon as we realized that we felt like this work was our life's calling, we were like, we have no option but to just like quit our jobs and go all in on this thing. Like regardless of podcasting being the hardest thing to monetize or how difficult, it's just like this very slow, monotonous, actually like kind of beautiful war of attrition. We wanted to be a part of that game because we just felt like that this, number one, this is what we're meant to do. And number two, if we put out a really good product and stick with it, like eventually, you'll be doing 100,000 downloads a month, 500,000 downloads a month, et cetera. It's like you see it with people like Chris Williamson. He posted on Twitter, I think it was like his 6-year arc of his downloads over time. And he was getting nothing for the first 3 years. And then in 2020, he got on Jordan Peterson, Jocko Willink, a couple big guests, and then his show has absolutely exploded.
Yeah, I'm seeing him everywhere. You can't get away from the guy. It's like
he's everywhere.
Good for him. Like he deserves it.
Yes.
And we were talking about Lex Friedman. We were here like, how long, if you had to guess, how long do you think Lex Friedman's been podcasting?
I think it's only been like 3 years.
What do you think?
Like 7?
9 years.
9
Really?
years.
Like I'm like, wow. I've only seen the guy like 2-3 years.
Dang.
And I'm like, I went and I pulled him up on YouTube, and I'm like, hit oldest. This same podcast format.
Really?
Didn't change anything.
Yeah.
Just banging it every single episode. I'm like, dude, if anybody deserves to be at the top, it's that freaking guy.
Yeah.
Like you put 9 years in, and it's like he goes from, a bunch of, guests, like good guest, but then you get to like Bezos and Elon and like all these massive names. It's like, yeah, and that's like, I think what it takes, that long-term journey.
Yes.
But it's just incredible. Chris Williamson, I heard he's dumping a ton of money on every single episode.
Like 50 to 100K.
Yeah. Nuts.
Like
right?
that. And he's so smart because I think the first podcast he made that big investment with was David Goggins like a year ago when Goggins wrote his second book. And then people were like, dude, why are you spending all this money on the podcast? And from his perspective, Goggins said, I'm doing one episode on Rogan and I'm doing one more podcast, and you're not going to see me until my next book comes out for like 4 years. So for Chris, he's like, well, why don't I invest and make this the best podcast it could possibly be? Because number one, it's David Goggins, and this is going to be the only piece of digital content with him long form that's going to live on for the next like 4 to 5 years. Yeah. And his show has absolutely exploded like the last year because of that, I think too.
Yeah. I mean, unless he has like a ton of sponsors, he's probably like, people think that I think a lot of these podcasters are making a ton of money, and some of them are, but a lot of them are really investing heavily in the show, like Mr. Beast, to where it's like they're investing that equity, they're rolling the equity back into every single episode. And you have somebody like him, and he's dumping 50, 100 grand in episodes. Like he might not be making that much now, but he might end up having some multi-billion-dollar offer or product or company down the road from all the relationships and everything that he's built with his audience. Yeah. Like it's awesome.
Yeah, and that attention to detail too, of just being like not unwavering in your commitment to excellence, like wanting to have the best product is gonna pay off in the long run. Like people will identify those clips that he has with David Goggins specifically based on knowing that it was that particular quality, the cinematic lighting, the amazing camera that they had. Like that is a brand in itself, just being able to see the quality, and you immediately know, you're like, oh, I'm watching a Chris Williams clip. Like I don't even need to see his face. Yeah. Which is, that's, I think, the best type of branding. Yeah. Like I've talked to, I spoke with Dominic, and I've mentioned a podcast. He's like, oh yeah. And he'll like mention something that I would have never thought about in a podcast. I just like kind of oversee it. But since he has that, type of mind, like in sound engineering, and like he sees things a little bit differently than I do, he'll mention like, oh, okay. Like attracting all these different audiences by having everything so perfect. Yes. Like it's really incredible. Do you think that you guys are going to start to push further into like different markets, like with some podcast guests, with kind of like what Chris Williamson and some of these people are doing? We would like to. And to Harry's point earlier, I think the core of how we started the show
when there was the most heart and soul behind it was really like digging deep with like the ranchers, the doctors, the health experts, et cetera. Then we really got on this kick of we just wanted to meet these really cool founders of these health-based brands. Because when you look at that infographic of the 10 companies that control the 47,000 products, the founders of these companies are the exact pushback to that. So we really wanted to give them a platform. We're also interested in business and entrepreneurship. So we felt like it checked all the boxes, and that was great. But I think we would ultimately like to branch out and have on like the Jordan Petersons of the world, the Chris Williamsons, people that can offer a really unique perspective. Because to Harry's point, it's like health builds this amazing baseline, and then it's on you to, learn about wealth from John and learn about discipline from Jocko Willink and all these other amazing people. Like, get your health in line first and then learn and go do something incredible with your life with some of these other topics that exist.
Yeah, this little insight into kind of how we're thinking about the show right now, because we're definitely thinking about a little bit of like a reorganization of how we're structuring the show, where Brett and I, we've been doing these interview style shows for the past 2 years. We really haven't done too many episodes where it's just me and him going back and forth on health and nutrition topics. But people who know of our content on Twitter, our whole growth path was launched because we started writing long form content on Twitter around health. So being able to then start to have more shows where Brett and I are going deep on a topic, talking about certain things like we did today, really in that format where it's like Brett and I talking about it instead of having a guest. So start to sprinkle that in much more. And then, I think being able to get guests in different areas, like I love the idea of getting people who are doing things in like the military space, who like the guy who's building the bunkers, that kind of taps into the same brain as the people who are listening to our show, people who really value sovereignty and want to have some level of independence. Like, it's the same sort of person. So tapping into those types of people will be awesome. And I think just the show in general has so much potential with just what we're talking about, because the health now is more of a hot button topic than ever. There's more politicalization of it, but at the end of the day, like, people have never been more sick. So the opportunity to get people healthier is just like massive.
I think what you guys are doing is awesome. Yeah. And I'm going to leave all your links in the description below this video. And I'm going to get some of what you guys are offering as well. Because I'm like, my wife has been trying to buy milk at like a local place, and it's been like harder and harder to get, not like at a store, but there's like a cow farmer that just sells milk. But it's just been a little bit harder and harder to get. But I think this year we're just like going to focus much more on eating cleaner, eating healthier, kind of scaling that out more. It's just been getting, I think it's just been getting a little bit more convenient just going to the store and getting the stuff, but it's stuff you probably shouldn't be eating. Yeah,
that little extra investment just goes such a long way too. Yeah, we'll do some digging to see if there's any other good like raw milk dairies that are in the South Florida area, or some good places that you can order from too. And we'd love to send you some Noble, because with your kids, if you do a shake with raw milk and then put a scoop of Noble chocolate in, if you don't tell them what it is, they literally think it's chocolate milk. It's so cool, because there's a bunch of moms that order from us, so they give it to their kids. And it's really cool how like the kids are getting in protein, nutrients, organs, all this stuff, but it tastes delicious and they think it's chocolate milk. So it's really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, appreciate it, John.
We appreciate it, man. Thanks for having us.
You got it.